I have not been to Minnesota in probably 20 years.
Bring your ass.
These guys survived the David Kahn era of Timberwolves basketball and live to tell about it. It's Flagrant Howls.
My friend Kyle Theige, I brought this up a half hour into the Game 4 recap episode last night with our guy Artis Woods, that in 2004, it was unthinkable for a baseball team down 3-0 to come back and force a Game 7 and then win the series and move on. And then the 2004 Red Sox came along. A really good team for a couple years, a really competitive team, playoffs the year before, devastating loss to the Yankees, a grand slam walk-off by Aaron Boone. And then they come in as the team to beat in the American League playoffs, and they run into the Yankees in the American League Championship Series. Yankees win the first game 10-7. Yankees win the second game 3-1, and then Yankees go into Boston actually in Game 3, and they win 19-8. Embarrassing. Game 4 the next night, and the Red Sox were telling reporters, "Don't let us get one. Don't let us get the first one." They win, walk off, 12 innings. The next night, another walk-off win, Game 5. Okay. Things are starting to clench up a little bit for the Yankees. Red Sox go into New York. They win Game 6, 4-2, bring it back. Well, stayed in New York for Game 7, and they blew the doors off the Yankees. It had to happen at some point in baseball, and it did for that 2004 Red Sox team. It's going to happen at some point in the NBA. I'll just end the sentence right there. End the sentence.
Why not
right
us? There. I will say that I described after Game 3 to Dane is that was a therapeutic loss because, and again, there's no reason to criticize takes changing after every 48 hours because the series is changing. That's the beauty of NBA playoff basketball. But after Game 3, I kind of compared it to whether you want to talk about running or horse racing, whatever, but when it got to that quarter of a mile, that final lap, that final mile in a marathon, one team just had another gear. And if you've ever run before and that person next to you is just longer strides, pulling away, and you're like, I'm giving everything I got, and that person next to me just is gaining more and more ground. That's how it felt after Game 3. So I was like, you know what? Maybe the Mavs are just the better team. And then last night, same setup, right? 5 minutes left, tie ball game, clutch time. And instead of letting the opponent just outstride them to the finish line, they flipped it on them. And now, do you have a series? Maybe you really have to hammer the home the one game at a time. But the nature of this series and what you just said is it's all kind of flipped. Because a lot of times teams are down 3-1, let's say, but they don't have the home court. So then Game 5 goes back to the team that has the 3-1 advantage. Well, this is so wonky because the Wolves blew those first 2 games at home where it's like, okay, Phil, just win Game 5. Don't worry about Game 6. Don't worry about anything else. Just if you win Game 5 and it's 3-2, now it really ratchets up the pressure. I don't think Dallas has a lot of pressure on them going into Game 5. That's my opinion. Because it's still you got to do it again. You got to prove that you can do this. And then if we lose, we get to go back home. But if it is 3-2 and it does go back to Dallas, then it's all the way ratcheted up because it's this is kind of your Game 7, Dallas, in a sense. Because if it gets to 3-3, I would not want to play with my life on the line at Target Center in a Game 7 if I'm Dallas. So really impressive performance last night. I couldn't stop thinking about Andrew Bynum and the Lakers when they got bounced by the Mavs many years ago. But Andrew Bynum, I think, tried to chokeslam J.J. Barea, got ejected, and they just got ran off the court.
Yeah.
The Minnesota Timberwolves haven't lost 4 consecutive basketball games since December 28th of 2022. That was 18 months ago. They just have this stopgap that refuses them to kind of slide too much, and it came through last night. Credit to the coaching, credit to the players, and I think most importantly last night, credit to Kyle Anderson and Karl-Anthony Towns.
Yeah. We should let's definitely put a pin in the Karl-Anthony Towns conversation and circle back, which we should do that. But in my just thinking about the 2004 Red Sox overcoming their 3-0 deficit, the one thing that they had besides a really good team, you have to have a really good team. There's a reason why teams in basketball, especially baseball, is a little more random. Mm-hmm. Basketball, the best team generally imposes its will over the course of 7 games. It's very rare that you see massive upsets in a 7-game series. In a game, 100%. In a series, most teams that fall down 3-0 are down 3-0 because they're just the inferior team.
Yeah,
like the
exactly.
The Pacers were down 3-0 despite a great fight and a high-powered offense because they're just not as good as Boston. That's not the case in this series. Like, if these two teams were to play each other 100 times, it's not like 80-20 Mavericks. It might even be 55-45 Wolves. And now you're seeing the Wolves push back here. But the one thing the Red Sox had besides a great lineup and great pitching, like you have to have a good roster, is they just had this sort of loosey-goosey gear to their team personality. Dude, they got down 3-0, and they said, we're the idiots. We're a bunch of idiots. That's our nickname. Cowboy up. We're going to drink whiskey shots before game 4 to get us loosened up. We got nothing to lose. Let's just go have some fun. Let's play our game. Boom, rip a shot before the game. Walk-off victory. Like, Anthony Edwards brings that levity, that it's like a carefree, fun nature, but also a really serious dog of a player when it matters. And for him to be walking around, shoot around, looking at Karl and saying he's going to hit 8 threes in this game, right? And does he really believe he's going to hit 8? Not necessarily, but he's pumping Karl's tires, creating a fun, loosey-goosey atmosphere. So, I mean, like, there is something to be said for don't let a team like this get the first one, because this isn't just an inferior team that's rising up for a gentleman's sweep. This is a team that could easily rattle off 4 straight wins, as they did against Phoenix, a really good Phoenix team. They can beat the Mavs 4 straight times. I'm not saying they will for sure, but, man, letting them get that win last night opens a huge door for this team.
And if they don't come back and pull off the unthinkable,
fire everyone, right?
I think it'll actually, game 3 to me, therapeutic loss. You just keep getting to this final lap and you can't outrun them. But then last night, the script flips and they do outrun them, and they do show that, to your point, we actually can beat this team. This isn't, I saw a lot of the internet has never been more full of stupid people right now, but so a lot of people say that the Wolves were just built to beat Denver, which is weird because before that they beat the Suns in 4, but that they couldn't beat the Mavs. And last night all it was just tightening of a rotation, a little smarter plays in the clutch. Again, Kyle Anderson last night was Chris Finch on the court, just breaking down plays, adjusting plays, calling audibles. But if the Wolves do not come back, Phil, and pull this off, I think last night's win is going to make it so that this whole team, this fan base, this coaching staff, this front office, has a really sour taste in their mouth this summer. And I think that's awesome. Like, that's the scar tissue you talk about, right? Like, if you get swept last night and you go, man, we just didn't have a chance. The Mavs are just better than us. They're built better than us. Maybe they got, more active bodies on the front line, or they just have 2 closers. But now the Wolves can say, we actually can beat this team. And if we lose in 5 or we lose in 6, then you really go back to that game 2. Man, we blew the coverage, right? Like, we should have never had Jaden drop off and just doubled Luka and made Luka get the ball out of his hands so he doesn't hit this killer 3. And I think that's how you build this stuff. What do you work on in the offseason? Everyone has their report now of this can be done, but is it too little too late, right? So game 5, though, if this is going to go down, it deserves to go down at Target Center, because I think those fans, every time I've been there, man, it's been crazy. So Game 5 on a Thursday night, again, that place should be absolutely insane. And we'll see what happens, because it hasn't been so great home court in the playoffs, but that was a real tough place to play in the regular season, and opposing coaches and players said that. So if you're going to go down swinging, and I'm excited to see these 15 guys and this fan base go down swinging if that's what happens on Thursday.
Maybe you said something interesting about just how different everything feels now that they're pushing back and they won a game and maybe they win another one. And there's a difference between just getting swept out and thinking, well, they've got 2 closers and there's clearly a Grand Canyon gap that we didn't see between these 2 teams. Like, the Wolves are kind of validating that it's not a Grand Canyon gap. Even if they do lose in 5, you can go back and look at the 18-point lead in game 2. But it's really interesting in that the franchise right now going into game 5 is sort of teetering on this fault line of they might be the better team and they might actually be the first team to come back and do this. Like 0-155. Is this the 1 in 155? Are they good enough as constructed to just rattle off 4 straight wins and get to like they can still win the championship as low as the odds are? Like that is part of the equation, at least for me. Maybe I'm a homer. But then like just on the other side of the fault line is, boy, they might need a better secondary player to Anthony Edwards. There's like a whole conversation about, do you need a better secondary player? Can you do that and keep Karl-Anthony Towns? Is Karl able to create his own shot often enough when the games are this tight? Like it's this crazy line that they're straddling right now, and we'll find out more in Game 5 and maybe in Game 6.
It's exactly, in my mind, it's exactly what Boston just went through last year. They were down 3-0 to the Heat. They come back. Is it good enough? Yeah. Force a Game 7. But I don't know, going back to that, I don't think the Miami Heat were better than the Boston Celtics, but they advanced, right? They just had a better closer. Jimmy Butler, didn't he have 50 in that Game 7, if I remember? I mean, he was just awesome in that series, and then obviously the Heat go on to play the Nuggets and lose in the finals. But what did the Celtics do when they were that close to the precipice of the finals? They ran it back with most of their guys. They knew they had cornerstones, but then they also went out and got Porzingis, and they got Drew Holiday, and they just beefed up, their front court and their back court. So people can do whatever they want with last night's win. You can just say, hey, they were desperate. They didn't want to get swept, and now they're going to lose in 5. And maybe, but I think that was an important win, if nothing else, for the psyche of these guys long term. You've seen Jaden McDaniels all series now have a coming out party. He has been as good as advertised, both defensively, as we know, but offensively. He hit every shot that he was spoon-fed last night. Ant's obviously doing his thing, Nas, and Karl again last night. So whatever happens moving forward, Phil, last night to me was a big moment that, hey, we can play with these guys, and if we do ultimately get bounced, there could be a lot of guys in that locker room saying, we probably should have beat them. And you couldn't have said that if you lost last night. You couldn't have gotten swept and say, we should have beat them, because that's just not the case. But last night you punched back, you got off the ropes, and again, I still think a lot of the pressure, obviously, is on Minnesota here, but you make this thing 3-2. That's all you got to do. 3-2. That's it. And then make Dallas go back to Dallas and see what can happen.
If it gets to a Game 6 in Dallas, that's a lot of pressure on Dallas. And I mean, we can have that conversation after Game 5 and really no sooner. But let's go back to the cat thing for a second here.
Yeah.
I would love to, as someone that has been probably more critical of Karl-Anthony Towns over the last 3 or 4 years in the Twin Cities media than anyone, I would like to start the cat conversation with a factual praise here. He was excellent when he was on the court last night, and we'll get to why he wasn't on the court as part of this conversation. But I'd like to shine a light on just how great and efficient his performance was last night. I went on StatHead and was just curious because he scored 25 points on 13 shots and was a plus 15. Just his impact was very, very noticeable in that game last night. So Cat is one of only 10 players over the past 5 seasons in the playoffs to rack up 25 points or more on 13 or fewer shots with a plus minus of 15 or better. And the other players on this list are guys like Jimmy Butler, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, but then you sprinkle in Duncan Robinson. Mike Conley from 2020, Utah, had a performance where he made, he had 27 points on 13 shots and was a plus 24 in a win over Denver. So to be that efficient at that time when your team needs it the most deserves a ton of praise. It was also the full Cat experience, and that you get the early foul trouble, then you get the 5th foul with 5 minutes to go in the 3rd. He eventually fouls out, and he probably should have played 10 or 12 more minutes in that game if not for foul trouble. And Anthony Edwards once again needles him in the post-game press conference dude, why are you fouling out? But when he's on the court and he's knocking down threes like that and he's getting to the rim, you saw the best and worst versions of Cat all in one night. And at the end of the day, like the best version prevailed because that was the thing that helped drive the victory. But just a really cat-like performance in Game 4 in every facet, Kyle.
They don't win that game last night without Karl-Anthony Towns. Team high plus 15. It was a good reminder for people watching, but I think it was also a good reminder for Karl, who has clearly been in his head. I think a lot of it's just been mental. Those first 3 games were, I don't know, the 3 worst big-time games he's played. I mean, he's had some playoff stinkers, but to just kind of no-show in games 1, 2, and 3 did not help, to the point that we've always been talking about. There's so many things that go into a basketball game, especially in this series, but if Ant and Karl can just outscore Kyrie and Luka, and then you have that defense and you have really solid role players, Mike Conley's playing his butt off, you can win these games. So I'm really impressed by him last night, especially after all the noise. But I'm almost in off-season mode, so I'm really starting to give less Fs. If Karl-Anthony Towns plays bad in Game 5, we need to criticize him for a lack of production. We need to criticize the basketball stuff. The other stuff is bullshit. The other stuff that was going on yesterday, the other stuff that goes around this narrative, the cringe stuff, all the different words that are whistles to describe him. What is the worst part about Karl-Anthony Towns? His sometimes lack of basketball IQ, his lack of production. I get it. Let's talk about it. But I am so done with the pot shots, both on TNT and in articles and all this stuff. We don't talk about guys that actually commit crimes like we talk about Karl. If you think he's odd or socially awkward, that's fine. But let's talk about basketball. And in the basketball so far this series, most of it has not been good. And last night, fifth foul, he did score 10 points after those 5 fouls, part of his 25. But man, yesterday was enough for me. So if you want to take pot shots at Karl-Anthony Towns, I'm out. Not you, but I'm just saying in general, because it gets real nasty about how they talk about him. And man, I'm not a big fan of cyberbullying, but some of this is just cyberbullying, what they're doing to that guy when we don't talk about, okay, Paul George doesn't have the most decorated resume when it comes to postseason stuff, and he's adored. So I am so tired of the way that some people talk about Karl-Anthony Towns, and you know what I'm talking about. You know what came out yesterday, that stupid-ass article. That's enough, man. This is not why I watch basketball. It's not how I cover basketball. And it takes a lot for me to reply to people, and that was just ridiculous.
Why didn't TNT or did the Wolves turn TNT down in the postgame? Because
I don't know why no one went up there. Yeah, that's a good question.
Kyrie was up there, and Luka was up there after their wins, right? And I don't know.
They should have sent Deshaun Nix. Just been like, hey, Deshaun Nix, you go. Actually, they should have sent Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert should have walked up there with pride because his defense in the final 5 minutes was incredible. There's nothing to show for it on a stat sheet, but he contested a Kyrie layup. He contested a Luka mid-range jump shot. He was great. But yeah, I don't know why.
Dude, it kind of felt like, with Barkley talking, it was wishful thinking because he didn't want to have to travel back to snowy Minneapolis, as he called it.
Dude, what is going on? What is going on with this show?
There was a video. So yesterday, I was out walking the dog yesterday, and it looked like it was snowing because there was so much pollen in the air. And there was a video from Target Field that went around the internet. I think John Boy posted it, and it looked like it was snowing. So people posted the video like, "Oh, it's snowing in Minneapolis." No, it's 70 degrees. There's just pollen all over the place. But I think my just back to the panel for a second. Wouldn't you bring one of the stars of the game up on national TV? Or have they been so critical of the Wolves and thought the series was over after the 3-0 lead that they were just embarrassed or ashamed? It's to me, it's weird that you wouldn't bring at least Anthony Edwards up to the panel. Or did he say no? I get why they didn't invite Karl and Gobert, because that panel has been clowning those guys for years and years and years, and one of the guys on that panel tried to choke out one of the players I just mentioned. But it is just, if they win Game 5, does one of those Wolves players get invited up? Do they say yes? What if Gobert goes off for 22 and 15 and 4 blocks or something? Do they invite him up to hang out with Draymond Green? I'm here for this whole dynamic.
If you watch post game, how ironic, but Draymond Green will not be in attendance for Game 5 because apparently his son has something going on, which again, you got personal stuff going on, but does work out pretty conveniently that Draymond does not have to return back to Target Center, where he will, again, be surrounded by a lot of chants about how he sucks. But I don't know, man. Yesterday kind of broke me. It broke me in the sense of, like, Charles Barkley can throw a lot of pot shots at people, but he also does it in kind of a self-demeaning way, because you can turn it back on him and say you've never won a title or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And he laughs about it. You and I talk about this all the time with our little media rants, that if you just don't take yourself too seriously, it's really hard to be made fun of. I mean, you and I are like two of the poster boys for that. Like, you can say whatever you want about us. Like, we don't take this too seriously, but we take it seriously enough to try to make good content. But some of the ways that they talk about Karl, man, is like really offensive.
Because I agree, that article that came out was weird. It was, my friends in a text thread say this about him.
He basically said, hey, I know Karl's lost parents to COVID and lost Flip Saunders and been through all this other stuff, but also he's cringe. And it's like, all right, cool article. From a website, by the way, that I used to write at and I used to edit, and everyone involved in that should be embarrassed, because that's not journalism. Okay, Twitter's not real. The internet is full of, again, if you want to criticize, put your name on it. It always says Phil Mackey and Kyle Theige and Judd Zolgad on these podcasts. That's my government name. Put your government name on it. Don't use some alias, or don't hide behind something. Okay, you don't like anonymous sources, so why would you love some anonymous pot shot across the bow? So where do I draw the line? I think if you wanted to say, hey, the Wolves got swept, Karl no-showed again, he fouled out, can you trust him? Does he have the chops for big game basketball? Does he have the IQ? He's much older than Ant. Can he do this? Or is he just a good stats bad team guy that needs to go somewhere else? Does he need to be, as you and I say, maybe the third banana? Maybe he can't be the second banana. He has to be the third. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But when you start calling into like what he wears or how he talks, I mean, just listen to what I'm saying. Like, that's crazy. What are we doing? Because there are so many other people in sports that actually do really bad things. Karl, his biggest, I guess, fault is that he just hasn't been successful, which has affected the franchise. And he's also weird. And I don't know, man, like, if we're going to start just hanging people for being weird, like, I don't have much more time, because I might be one of the weirdest people on earth.
I think part of it is, and again, I agree with everything you said. That article, we've already given like way too much attention to that article. It's trash. It's getting clowned all over the internet, as it should. Karl says some of the wildest stuff that, like the stuff from last year about, was it the GQ article or maybe it was Paul George's podcast, and because there was like three things from last summer, but one of them was what we, the Timberwolves, did by getting to the playoffs was more impressive than what the Nuggets did by winning the championship, like stuff like that. The 1,500 shots thing, that was just immediately Kenny Smith and those guys are like, mathematically, that's like, we've all practiced in the gym before. Some of the stuff he says is very self-inflicted, because he just like puts his foot in his mouth. But I'm with you, like, I think, like, for me, I'm going to highlight some of that stuff, because it's like, dude, what do you, like, you're bringing it on yourself. But to go a step further or two steps further and actively talk about his family dying from COVID as part of an article, like, there is a line somewhere that has been crossed a lot with Karl. And I think, like, for me, a couple days ago, I tweeted, he shot 27% over a 3-game playoff stretch. Only 15 players in NBA history have ever had that poor of a performance, or whatever the stat was. Yeah. That is a fact. Yeah. That's a fact. That's fine. Like, I believe that he deserves to be criticized as a supermax player for not performing well in the first 3 games of the series. And some people are uncomfortable with even that level of criticism in Minnesota. I don't understand. That's a topic for a different day. But but it does feel oddly personal beyond just like the factual basketball stuff with him. And I think it's because he has a quirky personality. He sometimes lets his insecurities sort of boil over into the things he says on a microphone. But hey, credit to that guy for bouncing back and being awesome when his team needed it in Game 4. Go do it again in Game 5. Go shut people up in Game 6, Game 7. It's all right in front of you right now for Karl.
But here's another example. As we talk about Karl and we talk about the TNT show, after Game 3, which was probably Karl's worst performance of the series, Charles Barkley came on and ripped him and said, I can't believe he didn't do the podium. Charles has played. Dane's there. Dane already cleared up. He wasn't requested to do the podium. So, but you're out there on a national stage saying this guy ducked media like he's Jamal Murray, when in reality, and I heard this from Dane, the locker rooms in Dallas are so small and hot that they can't do the typical go into the locker room stuff. So now you have to interview the players outside, like in the tunnel. Karl did, surrounded by 30 reporters, post-game after Game 3. But no one knows about it because once you get the jokes out there, the jokes kind of are cemented and minted. So no one thinks Karl did post-game media after Game 3 when he did. And that's when he said, so that's me defending it. But then in your case, 1,500 shot stuff, like, you don't have to say that stuff because as they said on the call, like Kenny and those guys, like, dude, you didn't shoot 1,500 shots.
Here's my amateur psychological breakdown of that. He is being told, like, in no uncertain terms, you've been terrible in these 3 games. Do you have a reason for it?
Yeah.
And he sometimes has a hard time just letting it sit that, yes, I have been terrible, period. He then goes to sort of the defense mechanism, which a lot of people would. Like, I just have to laugh because I put in all this work. I put up 1,500 shots a day. He's like kind of over exaggerating, and it's unfortunate that I'm getting these bounces. And he's kind of like pulling it off of himself and putting it into like the forces of basketball nature. And I think the guys on the panel and other people around the league, and this is the way it landed with me too, are like, dude, like you don't have to let your insecurities carry you to the point where you're lying about how many shots you put up or whatever it is. Like, just own it. You had 3 bad games, just own it. And like, that's how I interpreted the 1,500 shots thing, that he was like trying to distance himself. It was like, it's bad luck. I'm just getting unlucky bounces at the wrong time. Well, okay. I mean, like, then find a mid-range game, find a jump hook in the lane that's more consistent instead of like committing offensive fouls. Like, but again, he did in Game 4, and that's awesome. And let's keep doing that going into Game 5, Game 6.
Not only was he a plus 15 in Game 4, but to have that second half, again, he didn't have a 3-point attempt in the first half of Game 4. So to go 4 for 5, 3 of them in which were in the fourth quarter, I believe, 2 of which were back-to-back possessions. They're down 90-89. Now it's 92-90. Now it's 95-90. Again, shout out to Kyle Anderson because he's Mahomesing his way through that 5-man rotation out there during that time. But, with Karl, I didn't love those comments either, by the way. I just want to, sometimes it's just, I don't know, I wouldn't have said that. But I also, and this is kind of tied into Minnesota sports fandom, right? There's just kind of this sometimes damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I have no interest in that. And I see some of that in the Minnesota sports thing where every series they win, certain people are so amped, but then they lose a game and they're like, oh, Minnesota sports, it's never going to happen. Blair Walsh missed a field goal. With Karl, if he answers that stuff post-game, Game 3, and just gives a lot of, and Ant has done this, just a lot of short answers. No, I was bad tonight. Couldn't hit shots. No, I let the team down. If he just gave you one of those like real minimal 50 total words and 8 questions, I think you would have got clowned for that too. So I am just, I came away from that being like, I didn't love what he said, but also what did someone want him to say?
Yeah, I think he gets clowned like for shooting 27%. No, like there's no way to shoot 27% over 3 games and have people be like, like it wasn't that bad. Because the reality is, if he shoots 40% or 50%, like 50% from the field, 40% from 3, the Wolves are up 3-1 in the series right now. So, and there's a bunch of different things and reasons why, beyond Cat, why the series is 3-1 flipped in the Mavericks' favor. But if you could flip one thing and say, have one thing go back to normal, is it Gobert in the first few games? It would be Karl goes back to normal 3-point percentage. Karl goes back to normal 2-point percentage, which was like 36% for him. They probably have a 3-1 lead in this series.
And that's why your tweet after Game 3 about the other 15 guys that have shot this poorly through 3 games should not be criticized because it's a real basketball thing. I just come back to, if I was unemployed and I applied for 12 jobs and I never got any of them, 3 weeks later after I had gotten turned down for the 12th one, and then they interview me, what am I supposed to say? Be like, I am such a lousy candidate. Do you just break yourself down in public, or do you just, those are I'm literally kind of therapeutically saying this out loud, but I don't know what he was supposed to say, and that's the stuff that bugs me out. But I will say, Dane, I thought yesterday or 2 days ago had a really good tweet, and we both kind of vibed with this, and it was really long because Dane has a blue check mark and all that stuff. But he summed it up by just saying, Cat has to let go of external pressure and realize what we all have to realize. The coolest versions of ourselves are the ones where we're the most ourself. Mm-hmm. And Dane's spot on. No one's closer to Karl covering him than Dane. And that's what you and I are both trying to stress here, is just be yourself. And last night in the first half, I don't think Karl was himself. I think he was the same, trying to appease, trying to do what other people say, trying to attack off the dribble when that's not what this series is about. And in the second half, he just planted himself in the slot and in the corner and hit some threes, got down to the rim once, fed Rudy, part of an 8-0 run. And I thought in the second half, despite the foul trouble, he was more of himself. But, you know, what do we get in Game 5? Because he really erased some demons last night, but you are kind of judged on your last performance. So if they would have won the series last night, Karl would be getting praised again, but there's a lot of this series left. So, hey, I got one thing for you, but do you have any other? I mean, we're going to keep talking, but I got something for you that made me really happy last night.
Let's get to it in a second here, because I want to shout out two of our friends during the playoffs, one being Legendary Golf.
Oh, my God, yes.
Legendary Golf is a fantastic apparel company that is family-owned, Minnesota-based, and veteran-owned. So a portion of everything purchased at legendary.co, that's LGNDY.co, a portion of everything purchased goes to veteran organizations. In fact, people have been asking, hey, Mackey, where'd you get that hat that you've been rocking on these Flagrant Howls episodes? It's from Legendary. Got the state of Minnesota here with the little howling wolf in the center. Love it. Been rocking this almost every day since I got it like a week ago. Promo code at checkout, HOWL, for 20% off. That's HOWL at checkout for 20% off your order. It's LGNDY.co. That's LGNDY.co. Also, our friends at EcoFun are here for your summer fun here. EcoFun Motorsports, scooters, motorcycles, ATVs, side-by-sides, electric bikes, premier brands like Yamaha, Kawasaki, Vespa, Bentelli, you name it. On the water, if you visit the Forest Lake location, you can get into a 2024 Kawasaki, a Yamaha watercraft. So the Forest Lake location has the land and the water. Burnsville has the land stuff. EcoFun Motorsports, like I said, Forest Lake and Burnsville, you can snoop around to at ecofunmotorsports.com. That's ecofunmotorsports.com. Okay.
I got my Legendary hat in the bag, headed to New Orleans tomorrow for the first time in my life, for a bachelor party / golf trip. So I'm going to probably be doing some pods from an undisclosed location on Bourbon Street, but 92 degrees there and 80% humidity. I'm going to die. So I need Legendary polo and hat to keep me going.
It's going to be sticky. Yeah, I'm curious to get your New Orleans download. How many days, how many nights?
Oh, man, too many nights and too many days. But 4 nights there. But yeah, if anyone's listening, YouTube comments on Twitter, whatever, send me a message of a place to go. But never been. Bachelor party, golf trip.
Dude, that's a 4-night bachelor party?
I know. I'm not excited.
Dude.
Not excited. Also, at some point we need to talk about Airbnbs again. I think I've ranted before, but holy cow. I just wake up and they're like, hey, you know what? We might charge you this too. Oxygen tax. We're gonna have fresh air in your Airbnb and it's gonna cost you $600.
And if you don't, it's carbon monoxide. You're just gonna die, actually.
Yep.
So
yep.
You have to pay this fee.
I'm just not even gonna lead into this, set this up. I did send you this, but a real proud moment for me last night. John Krasinski with this tweet. Mike Conley on Chris Finch getting onto the court and getting a technical. You forget the impact it can have when your coach is up getting technicals, yelling, and we see him hobble around to do it. It's impressive. It lit a fire in all of us. Play some music, because I deserve a +1 for that. I've been saying that all season, and I love Finchy, but there is a armchair psychologist. There is a reward sometimes when you watch your coach, your leader, kind of go to war for you.
Just
or in
hobbling
your place.
out there.
He ditched the crutches. He said, bleep it, and he has now moved to the front. At one point, him and Mike and Nori were standing together, and it looked like Finch wanted to elbow him out of the way. Finch took over 2 huddles in the fourth quarter, if you go back and watch it. Those guys love playing for him. He loves coaching them. But I might not know much, Phil Mackey, but I know that every now and then a coach should get a technical. And Chris Finch got one last night. And did it lead to a win? I don't know, but that's what I'm going to tell myself.
Dude, I think there's been times there's not much to criticize Finchy for over the years, but there's been times where we say, kind of feels like the team, not as much this year, but like maybe the previous 2 years, kind of feels like the team could use the coach freaking out on Scott Foster right now and just send a jolt through the bench. Speaking of Scott Foster, I know Wolves fans get all uptight whenever you see Scott Foster in one of these playoff games. His nickname is the Extender. And damn it, last night, the Extender did his job and made it so that there was a game 5. Now, I don't think there's a couple of things here and there.
Except when he tried to absolutely nuke the series, fouling out Karl on a play that has been supposedly ripped out of the league. You're not supposed to be able to lurch into guys.
That was bad.
And then there's a really good cut-up. I love when they put two videos next to each other where Scott Foster was officiating James Harden at the Rockets against the Warriors a couple of years ago. Harden hits a big step-back three that shouldn't have counted, but he got the and one. And then last night, as soon as Luka shot that and got fouled by Ant, which, by the way, what a moment that we'll never talk about again. But if they would have lost that game, but the ball has barely left Luka's hands, and Scott Foster had 9 arms, and they were all doing fun pointing, like, this is going to count, this is going to count. So that's one of those fun moments in sports where we'll probably never talk about it again after May 29th. But if he would have hit the free throw, let's say, make it a 2-point game, Wolves come down, maybe split a pair, and then they tie it up, oh my God.
Yeah, we
would have had to call Blair Walsh.
That's the daunting thing is that, it was a close game. Down to the end, the Wolves pulled out a close game, but the best formula, and you're not going to be able to do this in games 5, 6, and 7 if it gets to a 7, but just have a 19-point lead and hang on to it. Just how about one blowout win? You had a couple against Denver. Just have, if game 5 could be a little bit like game 6, where it's just a no doubter the entire time, and you're not sweating whether Luka's going to hit ridiculous shots and Kyrie. That would be nice. Just once in this series. That's all I ask for.
You started this off with the 3-0 Red Sox and kind of saying that at some point, and that's facts, right? At some point, some team has to break through. Boston almost did it less than 12 months ago. But yeah, for this Timberwolves team, after rewatching it this morning, they played really good defense last night. That was the best, I think, defensive performance they've had in the series. I legitimately thought that was the worst offensive game they played all series.
It was clunky, very clunky. Turnovers.
15 turnovers. The Mavs turned those into 30 points. You missed 9 free throws. Again, this attention to detail stuff. But why am I saying that here kind of to close? It's because it's kind of what Mike Conley's been saying post-game. I don't think the Wolves have played very good all series. And that's credit to Dallas and Sean Sweeney, their assistant coach, and the defense that they're throwing at him. And obviously no Derek Lively last night. That's a big one. But you get to go home. You're down 3-1, but you're going back to your own bed. You haven't really played well. And all it takes is one of those play well games, right? Like a game 2 in Denver or a game 6 at home. If the Wolves can find it and stop playing B- basketball and play A- basketball, we might have a series on our hands. And like you said earlier, that's when the pressure immediately flips to the opponents. So game 5, Thursday night on TNT, no Draymond. It's going to be, what else do you want, man? Like I was telling Dane, if they win that game, I'm pretty sure I have this right, it'll be the first time, if they win game 5, it'll be the first time the Minnesota Timberwolves have ever played basketball in June.
Yeah, because May 31st, I think it was May 31st is when they were eliminated by the Lakers in 2004.
I know, I always come up with just the littlest hairs of stats, but June basketball, man, I don't care what you think, like that would be, we used to pray for times like this, so.
Somehow, and we're wrapping the episode right now, but somehow we just made it 40 minutes without fawning over or even like saying the words Anthony Edwards, who was a dog in that game.
Literally, he barked.
He barked at one point during a tie-up. But he was guarding Luka for long stretches. I want to say someone put out a stat that Luka was like 4 for 12 or 4 for 14 when Anthony Edwards was the primary. He's organizing huddles. The mic'd up stuff was great last night. The barking, then him organizing guys. Hey, get in here, rebound. And it's not fake leadership, man. This is my team. Even if it's Conley, get over here. I've got something to say, right? And then just taking over in that second half, getting to the places he needed to hit shots, to create open looks for others. Just a magnificent, mature, near triple-double performance for Anthony Edwards.
In talking about post-game stuff, whether whatever you think about what guys say post-game after wins or losses, I really did like what Ant said post-game after Game 3 when they're like, how do you not, sky is falling? He's like, because I've literally been through way more than losing a bunch of basketball games, which actually I should quickly shout out. Friend of the show, our friend, was announced this morning, Chris Hine, who covers the Timberwolves for the Star Tribune, does a great job. It was announced he'll be writing a book on Anthony Edwards due out early 2025.
Wow, that's cool.
But that's going to be like a big time book. No one better to write it than Chris. But when Ant said, yeah, I've been through way worse, I thought that was legitimate. I thought that was him being, that's what I wanted him to say, and that's what he should have said, and that's what he said. Yeah. But then pregame, to your point about mic'd up, like him and Luka, not that Luka, our Luka, were just kind of, saying they better kill us now, right? They better stomp us out now. They don't want us to go back to Minnesota. That energy is why he is the team's best player and the leader, and something that changes all the narratives. And this is not the same Timberwolves team because he's just different, man. He's mentally different. He's physically different. And it's going to set up an insane Game 5 where I think all Wolves fans are obligated to attend.
I see what you did there. Yes. I see what you did there, my friend. Sip your tea. Sip your tea. I think that's a wrap on this Game 4 day after episode of Flagrant Howls. He's Kyle. This may be the last time you ever hear from him now that he's going to New Orleans for 4 nights.
Might be dead.
We were texting with Grady and Jim Pete. We're just those guys are traveling. I think we might just see what happens the next few days. You're going to New Orleans and get those guys back in the mix either to preview the NBA Finals or to recap a wildly successful Timberwolves season. So you'll hear from them again before it's all said and done. All right, my friend. Safe travels to you. Good luck out there. And to the audience, thank you guys for sticking with us here on Flagrant Howls. This is a Timberwolves lifestyle podcast.
Why not us?